Hey Brian,
Hey, Jochen,
can you
how
hear
are
me
you?
well?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me well?
Yep, works wonderfully.
Excellent.
Um, yeah, do you want to jump right in or
Sounds good to me. I'm up for anything. Yeah. Yeah.
um so yeah, the first thing that just really comes to mind is how we met yeah, just like 2 months ago uh in
Yep.
Takasaki in your
Yep.
hometown.
Yep.
And since this was the first time meeting you in person, yeah, there was like really a little bit of this kind of tingly feeling. I had met you, I think, probably around 5 years ago in Rebel Wisdom on the channel, when they did like these little campfire gatherings for participants to comment on their latest, exploits or videos. And then throughout the years, I clearly remember several of your posts that you made on Emergent Commons, where, yeah, my experience has always been here's a deep thinker, someone who has a very unusual um, perspective. Like it's not such a common perspective, and maybe we'll touch on that in a bit as well. But then, yes, as I was sitting in the train from Tokyo to Takasaki, I was like, really, okay, now I'm getting to know this person, Brian, in the flesh. And so I'm also curious, did anything like this happen for you? Like what were your thoughts on this day when we met? Other than of course the weather.
Yeah, I was gonna say you met me in the flesh and in the rain. Yeah, that was part of the fun of that day. Me telling you, oh, it's gonna be perfect. That's the best time of year to come to my city, and then it poured down rain all day. So, yeah, that was fun. But such is the universe having its little joke at all of us, or at me in that case. But yeah, the danger of expectations. Um, yeah, that was a period that was interesting because it was very busy. I was doing that my blog every day, and so going into it, I think I remember not like it kind of just all of a sudden it was like, oh, tomorrow, like, or yeah, it was probably the day before, but it's like, oh, I'm meeting Jochen, like, and then that night I was like, yeah, kind of like struck me that yeah, you're the only second person that's ever actually, well, third now, but second person from our community that has, been able to get all the way to meet me because just because someone comes to Japan, it's still another 2, 3 hours, from Tokyo to get up here. And so, it's not necessarily that there have been a few other people who have visited over the years. And just because, well, like you came the last time, like it's not necessarily always going to fit into your travel plans when you're coming to this country because there's a lot to do, and especially in your first visit. So then it just kind of dawned on me like, wow, he really must value me and value our friendship to come all this way. And that's really cool. So I hope we have a great day. And that's probably why I had a little bit of that, you know, I don't know if it turned out perfectly, I think, because we just wanted to spend time with each other. So it didn't really matter what we did. And you had, jet lag at the time. So rather than us getting a car and driving around, it was like the rain just kind of made it so that all right, we'll go to this cafe and then we'll talk for 2 hours. We'll go to this cafe and talk for two, so I think it worked out perfectly, but I remember feeling a little bit of kind of like, oh, I wanted to show you a good time. And, because of the weather, we couldn't really do that. But then in the end, it was like, well, that's maybe not why you weren't traveling up here to see my fair city, although, I'm sure he would have enjoyed it, but that wasn't the purpose. So, yeah, those are just some initial thoughts.
And as you're saying that, I've now told this to a number of people that, this has been my first travel as an adult where I am traveling in a foreign country without someone with me. In the past, before
Mm,
coming to the United States, I would travel with my brother at times. We would go to Turkey, would go to the Netherlands, would, go somewhere else. And then when I moved here, I would travel with other people. Sometimes my brothers actually came to visit me. I would drive around with them. Then I drove with my first long-term boyfriend and then with my husband. And yeah, it's true. I went on one or two business trips by myself, but that was in the United States or something. And so like it was never for the purpose of travel. So
Mm,
this was really the first time as an adult that I traveled by myself to travel into a foreign country. And as my time first in Japan, mostly like Tokyo and Takasaki, and then also in Seoul and then back to Tokyo, when that as that neared its completion, I really had this very, very strong sense I didn't come here to see things. I
mm,
came here to meet with people. I met
mm,
with you, I met with this pianist in Seoul, and then I met with another friend from China who came to Tokyo just for 2 days to hang out. And
mm,
that's why I came. And of course, I enjoyed the city, right? I enjoyed Tokyo, I enjoyed Seoul.
mm,
But if I hadn't met anyone, it would have felt not like a useless trip, but like so much less fulfilling. And
mm,
so clearly, when I decided to come by myself, and then we arranged for me to come to Takasaki, yes, that was the purpose of the trip to meet you. And
mm,
as much as you said, right, it might have been nice to have a bit of sunshine on the day that I arrived. Um, and we still got to enjoy a really good some noodle in a very
yeah,
kind of I
that
would say
lunch was phenomenal.
authentic
Yeah.
restaurant
Hmm.
where I still have this memory of the first person who came, maybe not speaking any English, and you're
Right.
doing like doing all the ordering, and then I think the next person she spoke a little bit of English, just because
Right.
it wasn't a very touristy restaurant, really. It was
No,
really an
not at all.
authentic restaurant for
Yeah.
Japanese
Even the
people,
menu was all in Japanese. Yeah.
s-
Yeah.
not even sitting on the floor, like more kneeling on the floor,
Mm,
and really having this experience. But there, yeah, then spending the time with you and sampling who is this person? Because, yeah, as much as we've been on Zoom calls together and on especially on group Zoom calls. And I remember the one call I think where Clay introduced you a little bit to
all
people who
right.
wanted to come. I remember that call. But then really meeting with you in person, that was different. Uh, and maybe even precisely because it had rained so much and you were sitting initially in the hotel lobby to dry off a little bit. And yeah, even this experience of seeing this is how Bryan deals with the universe playing a little trick on him. Because
Mm,
those are things learning about friends that I've noticed that tell me a lot about who are the people who I may be interested in becoming friends with, because
mm,
it tells me here's a quality in a person that I can learn from. And in this case, really this very, like whatever shenanigans the universe throws at me, I'm going to take it. And that for me is now a part of the story that I have in mind when I think of you, of Bryan, the person is this person who can, when the universe throws a little bit of a tantrum, you're just like, yeah, 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 I know, but I'll take it.
right. Right. Laugh with it rather than get angry at
Yeah,
it kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say that probably there are other days or maybe earlier in my life where it might have been handled not quite as well, but I think I probably got that some of those qualities, like I think we all get, different people rub off on us, and my parents both have that kind of quality of go with the flow, and like you can't control every element in your life, and and like when they traveled a lot and they talked to me a lot about on their travels, like you don't control the weather, so you just have to whatever it is, and then you have to adjust to it. And like, are you going to let it ruin your trip? No. And so I kind of take that to, everyday life. Like, why would I I'm not gonna let rain or whatever ruin my day. It's just weather, like um but yeah, that's interesting to think about because yeah, when we show up on these Zoom calls, we're in our wherever, offices, homes, wherever, but like we kind of have a little more control over the environment and how we show up to these things. But when we're out like meeting somebody in the real world, we don't have that necessarily. Like there's things out of our control, and so how do we um and I think that does show us more of a person's character, and so it's interesting we get together in the one main group once a week, and we have really deep conversations there, and I think we get to know each other reasonably well, but there still are things that we don't even know. Like another interesting example of this is when I went to America in 2024, I met with Mari, and neither of us knew how tall each other were. And I'm not that tall. I'm like 6 foot tall. So I think I'm a little taller than the average American, but not that tall, right? But she's shorter than the average woman. So I look really tall next to her. And so the picture makes me look like a giant. But that was just kind of interesting. Like when she walked in the door, I was like, oh, you're quite short. And she probably thought, oh, Brian's tall or whatever. So, or actually, I talked to her about it later. She said because she is shorter, like she tends to, everybody's kind of tall to her. So, doesn't really impact her so much. But yeah, just those are interesting how they show up, in our, in the physical world because they don't necessarily show up in these online environments. So,
And not that we have to dwell on this, but because it really came now to mind how much I am appreciating that I have friends here in the city who I can meet in person every once in a while, and how much of a change that was at the beginning of COVID when everyone was told, stay home, don't meet people, and that I can even understand that for some people it may be tempting because, as you said, when you are at home, you do have this control over the environment.
mm,
You can even sit somewhere right even in a half shirt, and no one will know how the rest
right.
of you looks like because that's the only part that you would ever get to see on Zoom. And the difference that it makes if you meet someone in person, and you especially if you meet them in an environment like a cafe or restaurant where there's other people, where you can even like, get this flavor of the other person. How does this person respond to maybe someone like staff in the restaurant who is not very attentive, or like whatever,
Mm,
when something happens, something like a glass spills on the table, how does this person respond? And all of these little nuances, they are lost when you only ever get to see people on Zoom, or like even less.
mm,
And so how much like, and I was just reminded how much I appreciate all of that richness of meeting people in person.
mm, mm. And then there are downsides too.
Sure.
I mean, I don't need to go there, but like you meet with someone and you're like, wow, this person's body odor is something I never imagined. Or I'm not saying that was you, but no, I'm
I'm glad.
actually not saying that was anybody. That's not anybody I've actually met, like from after having met from a Zoom call. But I imagine it could happen, like
Yeah.
where you just meet with someone and you're like, or something about there are certain people who, for whatever reason, their physical presence kind of it irritates us or rubs us the wrong way, and um, so that's just something else that could come up. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting how yeah, the meeting up in person thing. I mean, I think it's one of the things that's a real challenge for people who, foreigners who come to live in Japan, where especially where I live, or even more, like it's even I can't even really speak to it, but the foreigners who get put out into the countryside in like a town of 500 or whatever, and they're like the only foreigner around, and um, maybe they speak Japanese a little, maybe they don't, but it's like it's, one of the experiences I've had over the years is that, and I remember being told this when I first came here by someone. He's like, you're going to find out pretty quick, like the people that you're going to want to become friends with are the ones that you're going to sense like maybe you're going to stick around for a little while, Now I personally don't like discern that, like, oh, well, this person's going to be out here in 2 years, so I won't be friends. But I understood what he meant because um it is hard when people come in your life and like you really get on with them and then they're just gone, oh, I'm leaving now,
Mhm.
and it's really hard, I think, nowadays. Well, it's been this way since I got here. I shouldn't just say nowadays, but to maintain, you know, long-term in-person relationships as a foreigner living in in this country because, and I'm not just speaking about the language barrier, which is big, but there's also a cultural barrier, which is big. And I think it's a little bit, that side of things may be underappreciated by people who haven't lived here or, maybe even just visit. I mean, you get to see some of the cultural barriers, but I was told one of the best bits of advice I was told before I came here was by one of my dad's friends who had lived here for 7 years. And he told me, no matter what you do, don't try to become Japanese because they'll never see you as that you never will be Japanese, like in the mind of other Japanese people. Like you are an outsider. They cannot not, and it makes sense, right? Like I don't look at all Japanese, right? So he said, be yourself, just be yourself, and they're going to appreciate that more, and you'll have a better experience. And so I'm kind of rambling here. I'm not really sure what my point is, but just that yeah, the culture here is one that it's very, even for people, even for Japanese people, it's very challenging to have friendships, and to maintain them, in-person friendships, So yeah.
And like you're married to a Japanese woman, and I
Mm,
assume your children don't look entirely Western. So I assume that they are more or less integrated normally into Japanese culture and society.
right.
And
Mm,
but I'm still, now that you brought it up, curious if you could point to specific differences in the qualities of, like, how do Japanese people, even amongst themselves,
mm,
think of and fulfill, embody, inhabit friendship? How do they do friendship, and how is that maybe different from friendship between Americans or,
mm. Well, of course, I want to just lead with the caveat that we're speaking in generalities here, and
sure.
one thing I think that this also speaks to one of the issues that I think because it's a homogenous culture, um, I had this stereotype when I came before I came here that, all Japanese are kind of the same or whatever, but it didn't take me more than maybe a few classes of teaching English that I realized, oh, actually Japanese people are all unique, just like in America. It might be a little bit harder to see that uniqueness as like the external representations, but so with that caveat out of the way, the people here, like, friendship is I think for adults here, it's challenging because it still is in a lot of ways like a traditional culture and much more than the US. Like the US is like kind of its identity is about always like reinventing itself and always finding, where the Japanese identity is like Japanese, like, like we are Japanese and this is what Japanese people do. And then again, there's the whole West East, Western cultural identity as an individual and the Eastern more as a collective. Um, but for the adults here, it's kind of assumed that, you're going to, by the time you're 25 or 30, you're going to find your life partner, you're going to have children, and then a lot of your friendships are going to come out of like your groups of children. Like like for example, my kids both played on the baseball team. So a lot of our friendships were with other parents who had kids on the baseball team because not during the week we were working and then on the weekends we spent anywhere from 4 to 8 hours with this other group of people. So it's kind of like friendships here get formed through the groups that you join, could be another way of saying that. Um, and so as a parent, who has kids involved in things, you just form friendships in that way. And then the other thing I'll say that's quite different from the US, at least in my experience, is that the people, it's still very gender based here. Where like and I used to always break this rule in the baseball team because like I'm a people person. I like people of all shapes and sizes. I don't really, oh, you or this or that, so I don't talk to you. It's like, no, I'm actually the more different someone is in some ways, the more I want to talk to them. Um, but with like the baseball team, the women like there's the backstop and the women would be on one side and the men would be on the other side. And like they don't really meet up very often, right? Like the women have their roles and the men have their roles and like and in between when men were mostly helping the practice and the women were kind of running behind the scenes stuff. But when there were little breaks, like we didn't mingle that much, right? Where I would, I'd go over and start talking to one of the women or whatever. But I always noticed that like just wasn't done by anybody but me. Even my wife didn't come over to our side so much, you know what I mean? So it's like, so that to me is always interesting, that whole like that how much the gender roles shape who you become friends with, who you're allowed to have, not allowed, but yeah, in a way allowed, who you culturally it's acceptable. So, um, yeah, that's one thing that comes up.
And again, not to dwell there a long time, but at least the one American cultural reference that I have pop in my mind is the movie When Harry Met Sally, where
Mm,
I think Harry Burns, played by Billy Crystal, tells Sally Albright something like, "Oh yeah, men and women can never be friends." And so I do think
mm,
that in the popular culture there was at least some recognition that it's tricky, that
right.
there are these complications. But I do feel that the movie, and probably it was a success because it does represent some of the zeitgeist from the 1980s, I think, right? It's an early 80s movie, I believe,
Not yeah, early 90s,
or
late
early
80s anyway, but
90s,
yeah, I think it's a
late
little later.
80s.
But anyway, it doesn't yeah.
But so where it kind of represents the desire the desire for men and women to get along as friends, and then
Mm,
depicting the difficulties with that. Whereas what I'm
right.
hearing from you is that in Japanese culture, people just accept, yeah, this may be too difficult, so let's rather not try this. Other than
Mm,
for the purpose of dating and then at some point, getting together and but not
right.
not as like just friends, as platonic friends.
Right.
Um, and at least this now does remind me of a conversation I've had with someone that was not recorded, so it's not part of the series, but where it is my impression that partnerships often have this kind of like, life partnerships. For me, in my own marriage, but also observing other people, seem to have this quality of complementariness, where like the people who get together really complement one another, where I might be really good with, I don't know, finances or doing certain phone calls, and I'm doing the laundry and my husband is doing some other things, where it is more
Mm,
that type of principle. Whereas with friends, I have more the experience that there is some tackling the same problem together, more like this
mm,
going out into the world and going on the hunt together, or like it,
mm, mm,
that type of dynamic. And so I can at least also understand that some cultures codify this type of difference between an intimate partner and a friend in this manner, by which you don't mix the two as much as it is done, I think, in US culture or even like Western
right.
culture. Like this whole
Mm,
friends with benefits thing, where sure, someone is a
right.
friend, but then you also try to mix this other channel into this relationship, which really I think does complicate probably matters quite a bit.
Right. And that might be, yeah, just speaking autobiographically for a second. I've since I was a little kid, I've always had both male and female friends. Like, And I think one of the reasons I've been able to manage that is that I always did compartmentalize like this girl, or, as I got older, when I was younger, I didn't think about it. But by the time I got to, junior high, high school or whatever, it was like, this is a friend. And so I'm not pursuing that other thing, like there's no ins there. And I think a lot what happened was as a result of that, like a lot of girls and women have come to, they trust me as a friend because they know that I'm not, where a lot of men like always have this, I think a lot of, there's an ulterior motive, like, well, maybe it'll go there, Um, and so, and then also the other thing on that is that, a lot of my female friends, like, are people I've never actually met. It's only online, and so there is no, it's easy to keep that boundary. But yeah, you do bring up a good point that I think again, you mentioned earlier that I have a unique way of seeing things and being, and I think that even back in the day, I was kind of unique in that regard, like that I would have, just female friends, and it was like, and then some of my guy friends would be like, "Are you thinking?" And I'm like, "No, like she's my friend." You know what I mean? It's like, so it just that it's interesting that we're talking about. I never thought about this before, but going back to the Japanese thing, like it's like that compartmentalization of relationship. Like I guess I kind of do that in some ways, or I have done that with, and that's how I've been able to have a lot of just variety of friends. And I don't know. I think I tend to treat, like, I try, at least I try to like see everybody as my equal, you know? Um, and this can actually take the conversation somewhere different, but like, I'm a teacher, right? And like I always tell when I do my first class with students, like my adult students, that like my general relational attitude toward teaching is like, I'm a teacher and I'm a student. You are a teacher and you are a student. This like separation. Yes, on this topic of English, I'm your teacher. I know the topic, so I have more knowledge to impart to you. But the questions you ask me are going to teach me about English and about Japanese, right? Like, and so I'm here to learn from you just as, and so that kind of like not going in on this hierarchy of like teacher up here, student down here, like instead just like meeting someone, like we all have something to exchange with each other, and what is that thing, and then let's go from there, I think is a, at least for me, I mean, it's made me a popular teacher over the years. I've had a lot of great feedback just because, and I think a lot of it is that sort of attitude I have. And then like today I'm teaching my class. I'll finish at this. Today I have one group that I meet with 3 Mondays a week, or 3 Mondays a month, and it's 90 minutes. And I call them my senior citizens class because most of them are senior citizens. But like today I'm going, like last week I did kind of a presentation and basically took the whole class. And I told them next week I'm not gonna, like, at the start of last week's class, I said, I'm going to do a presentation today, and I don't know how long it'll take, but we're going to do that. And I said, but next week, because they like to do presentations too, I'm like, next week the floor is all yours. I'm not going to bring anything to class next week. It's up to you. Because I knew like yesterday I had this all day job, and I just was like, I try to only do one presentation per three, meetings per month. And I knew that they would be kind of like a little backed up because they didn't get to talk. So I prepared for it this morning, and like basically I wrote down like intro, ad lib, because I know on my bike ride over there, something will come up this morning that will just like, okay, that's what we'll talk about for 5 minutes. And then part of that ad libbing is like, so they're going to be telling me stories, and then the whole class, I'm just going to be listening, and then, okay, that's really interesting. And then I'll try to find if there's some English I can teach from that. Um, and as a result of having that kind of attitude of like, let them lead the class, like I don't really have to be the teacher here today, like uh and I think that can apply to just friendship and relationships in general, like it doesn't always have to be one person is, anyway, I don't know if there's any threads to
Oh
pull on
no.
there. I'm sure there
So
are. Yeah.
the and there are two related things that have come up while you were describing all of that, Brian. One is really an observation about you as a person, where in my perception of you, the idea that someone gets to tell you what to do is really a no-go. That's no-go
Mm,
zone for Brian in
mm,
my story of you. And
mm.
similarly, I have never experienced you as someone who would even remotely enjoy the idea of telling someone else what to do.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
And then embedding that in the community where we are now members together at Emergent Commons, I can now also see much more clearly what might get in the way between certain peoples to ever become friends. Because, yeah, I do think that for better or for worse, and I wouldn't exclude myself from that, right? So I want to be very clear that I'm not perfect friend material within the community sometimes, because I can see that there is a desire to educate people,
Yeah.
to to give people this sense of, oh, I figured out this fact about the world, this process in the world, this mechanics, these mechanics in the world, mechanisms, whatever. And now I'm going to tell you about it, and you better listen because I've spent so much time figuring it out. And if you don't listen, you're disrespecting me, right? So
Right.
there's this kind of moment or like this attitude in the air that then creates a status difference because,
Mm,
well, if I want to be someone's teacher in something, I will then insist that this person listens to me.
mm,
And that is really difficult to align with friendship for me, because I don't want to have friends who show up in my life as these kind of people who
all right.
teach me about who have this attitude of wanting to teach me, which is
Authority
different from
figures, yeah.
actually teaching me. Because, right, so for instance, if I come to you and I ask you, for instance, you have read a lot about astrology just because it is one of your interests, right? To really kind of understand, how do people think about it? How do people use it? What can I actually learn from the patterns that people have described there? And so I come to you with a
Mm,
question. Of course, I want you to teach me.
right.
But that is different from you coming to people in the community and saying, hey, I've spent 5 years learning about astrology, so you now all have to listen to me because I am like the Mr. Astrology guy,
Right.
right? So that would be different. And in a friendship, so to come back to friendship as a set of maybe principles, yes, how much do I enjoy when the person who I'm meeting feels like an equal, when I have, and of
Mm,
course, not an equal where I can't learn or I can't teach, but an equal when it comes to, if for instance I disagree with something that the other person has to say, there is no assumption that because they have spent more time on it that they know better, right?
mm,
That is not the assumption in a friendship.
mm, right. Well, I watched a little bit of well, three calls, Leslie's, Karen, and Jeremy. Although Jeremy was mostly listening, I took my little morning nap because Jeremy has a really good voice for napping too. Love you, Jeremy. I've never done that on a call that I can remember, but yeah, I was like, I need a little break, and I'm like, all right, we'll go lay down here and take a little nap. But Karen was talking about respect, like
Yeah.
how important respect is in friendship, and I think that is that, like seeing the other person as an equal, and that to me is the ground of what that respect is based in, like everybody here is deserving of like so I'll just tell you like I mean I think I've said this in calls before but like my general like take on like what's going on what is life spiritual whatever we are all like way back when God was all sitting there by himself and you know what I'm kind of bored and so then he decided to and I'm kind of lonely and so he created everything and that means every single person on this planet everything we see around us is this aspect of this God, like we're all little incarnations. And so if you truly believe that, then you would think you would respect people because that person over there is an incarnation of God, just as I am, right? And so if you unless you don't care about if you're like one of these people that like, well, God doesn't matter, but I mean, I don't think you would have that worldview if you so just from that level alone, I want to be willing to, show people that respect and how I treat them, like and then on a more secular kind of everyday perspective, it just seems to be a better life when you treat others with respect because then they treat you with respect. And then it's just like, life is in a lot of ways a mirror, like we go out in the world. If you go out in the world all pissed off, then you'll end up something so you'll end up encountering pissed off people or pissed off nature or something will, there will be that energy coming back at you. So I don't know. I just found for me at least when and I think that's why I've always been a bit of a, not a bit, definitely a social chameleon. Like I'm just generally like I can, in high school there were all these, the different cliques or whatever, and like I had friends in every clique, and I was part of each certain cliques, but it was like I could never one thing that always interests me about people who are in that kind of world is like some of them will just kind of tend to stay in that group and in that clique, where to me, it's like I would usually be like, okay, this clique is serving this one aspect of my personality. But after a while, I'm like, all right, that's fulfilled. I need to go to the other clique for, so, like my jock friends would be like, all right, I've gotten my, I've had my fun and my locker room talk. It's all taken out of me. Now I got to go to my artsy friends and like, let's talk about theater or whatever and music and stuff, So I think once you become an adult, maybe some of those compartments get broken down a little bit. But in high school, it always used to interest me that like some people would just stay in that group and that was who they were with, But for me, it's like, yeah, that's I don't know. Life has I'm definitely a person who likes to have a lot of diversity in my world. So, you know.
And you did mention that you came to the United States to, and then you got to see Mari. And I somehow assume that you still have some friends that are here in the United States. And I'm at least also curious how, like, have there been difficulties if you compare the time before moving to Japan? It's a long time ago. But
Hmm.
if you compare the quality, I only assume that the quality of friendship has changed, but like, have there been specific difficulties that you can recall of keeping those friendships with people going with
Um,
like being in a different location now?
well, I mean, of course, some people just kind of, because you're not, especially the ones who maybe I got together for more physical type, not so much intellectual or emotional or whatever. Some of them just like for example, the softball team I played with, when before I came to Japan, I was involved with this softball team and I was one of the better players and we played a lot and then, even during the off season, we'd get together. Like I think my last Super Bowl Sunday was at the softball team guy's house in town and got together and had a Super Bowl party, like most of those people I haven't kept in touch with. There's a few, but a lot of them, have lost touch. But that's just because I'm not in the physical reality. But and then there are some who, not to go into a too controversial topic, but during the last several years, as people got really caught up in their perspective on things, you know, decided to drop me or whatever, or my way of kind of being and questioning things and being a bit open-minded was not didn't fit their comfort zone. So some of those got broken up and some of those, and that's the other thing that's been interesting in my experience the last like 5 years or so is like actually learning. I think because I turned 50 a couple years ago, in January 2023, I'm much more aware now that, like that whole thing about mortality, like we're not going to be here forever, like at 40 it didn't really hit me. I think I was too much in the middle of raising kids and career and all that stuff, but at 50 it really kind of hit me like so I've become more discerning with who I give my time to, like and so as some people sort of quote unquote dropped me or whatever because I didn't think as they did, it was like, all right, I guess that relationship is either on pause or over or whatever, and there will be others. And so I haven't take I used to take those kind of things a lot more to heart. Like, what could have I done to keep it going? How could, is there any way I can keep? But now in the last few years, it's been like, all right, more room for a cooler person to, someone who I resonate with more to show up. And the last thing I'll say is that living here, I mean, in the world we live in now with online, the ability to make pretty darn deep connections online. And I was doing it like because I live in Japan since 2004. I made like some really deep friendships online, like in the very heyday of like Facebook and stuff. Like one of my good friends I met was a person who I heard on a podcast. So I just went onto her Facebook page and started responding. And then like we became like I consider her kind of family. She's the woman who got me my Rebel Wisdom membership. She gave me just out of the blue, like, here's 1 year membership to this community. I think you'll enjoy it. So and I met her in 2009. So, but that was partly out of necessity in the sense that being over here, I've had to kind of keep my relational chops, partly by using the online world. And I often wonder if I don't think I would have stayed in Japan more than a few years if it wasn't for the internet connecting us because I'm just too much interested in, I'm an English teacher, not English teacher, but I'm a writer, I'm a reader, and like there's too much about the English language I love that if I wasn't able to use it as often as I can with the online world, I would be like, that would just be a real big loss for me. So,
And as you were talking about the years since Facebook really started, 2008, 2009, thereabouts, I think, and then
mhm,
being able to use that to connect and then stay in touch with people, I'm at least also imagining, maybe like I wanted to use the word realizing, but imagining that you might have gotten in a lot more practice on how to
mm,
use these kind of virtual channels to have particularly meaningful connections with people that other people
mm,
only got used to maybe during COVID, where until then, because they had these kind of real world in the flesh experiences, they didn't have to learn how to properly use these virtual channels without risking just as much breakage. And you have
mm,
described that the other people, and I'm really kind of wondering now whether some of the people that have found it difficult, for instance, to, yeah, take your really open-minded positions, thoughts, perspectives on the world as it currently stands, might be because they have not had as much practice with this type of exchange. Because th
mm,
this is something that I think many people have now researched and commented on. It really takes a while to learn how to not overinterpret what you read, let's say, in a Facebook post or what you read on a
mm,
social media post as like, if there's anything that I disagree with in this post and it is a little more strongly worded, then I need to already freak out about this person and like, oh, that's what they believe, then I cannot trust them or something. But that,
mm,
do not treat this written text on the page as though the person was saying it to your face. Because if you make that
mm,
mistake, you're just misunderstanding the nature of the medium to some extent. And
mm,
it is really difficult. And it took me, I remember during the first Trump campaign and the beginning of the first Trump presidency, I got into so many situations like hot waters with people on Facebook, in comment threads, in posts that I made, and I had a separate kind of blog or like a WordPress site where I published articles, and every once in a while I linked to one on Facebook. And I really noticed people who know me in real life, they really know me and they have known me for 2 or 3 years, and yet they would read an article that I've written or they would read a Facebook comment and they would construe me as this kind of hateful person, whatever, despite the fact that they had met me. And I was like, why are you doing this? And sometimes I would do this to other people too.
Mm, mm,
And so I'm at least just again recognizing or imagining that yes, maybe because you've had this type of communication for a very long time already, that it also really allowed you to develop a much more nuanced or much more open and curiosity driven approach when it comes to engaging with people on, let's say, this written platform that we're using, emergent comments, where if you read someone's posts or comments, it seems much more easy for you to take take something that they are unhappy with without necessarily taking everything that they say verbatim, as though
mm,
whatever they say is exactly they would say it this way to your face, right? You don't, it seems to me that you're not making that misunderstanding as much as other people.
mm. Yeah, there's a few ways I could go with this. Well, I'll start with okay. Um, do you know the book The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz? Have you ever heard of that book?
I've heard
It's like
of the title and I'm pretty
it,
sure that I know some of it, but I don't know, like I've not read the book.
anyway, it came out I think in the late 90s and it's apparent he's like a Toltec, Mexican kind of shaman and it's from their wisdom traditions. And I happened to read it around that time, late 90s, early 2000s. And like the one that really stuck with me is don't take things personally. And then it's like dot dot dot, even if they are meant personally or something like that. Um, and like I think as a person who has written fiction and loves fiction, I have an ability that kind of develops a skill in you or an ability to like recognize that like this person who's showing up here, like how they're reacting or relating to me, like it probably doesn't have anything to do with me. More likely than not, it really doesn't. They might be talking to me, they might be using my name, but like they're bringing whatever they're bringing is like a lot of it has nothing to do with me. Um, and so I sort of have operated from that perspective for 25 years now, you know? And then this next thing that would come up is that again, back in the late 90s, and I wrote a blog post about this. It's one of my favorite posts I've written. And I started writing blogs in like 2011, 2012. But I wrote a post about this, and it was called think the title was something like using like social media to love or to hate or something like that, right? And I had this like really profound experience. It was when in my very early days of getting on like America Online and those chat rooms and stuff where I kind of heard or I say heard, I often tell people heard. It's like it's hard to explain what intuition is, but I had this immediate understanding that like I can use social media to love people or I can use them to hate people. Like it's like because we have this like even right now, I could be like, Jochen, I'm done with this conversation, and like so there's a safety there, right? Like that, but that allows me to be in a way, um, I can I have more, there's more courage because of that safety, right? Like, so I could be a total prick to you and like, you're not going to punch me unless you figured out a way to put your hand through the screen and it's going to pop out, which maybe that's coming. I hope not. But, Mac, if you're listening, please do not add that to my features. But, but yeah, like, I could insult you or whatever, and it's like there's no physical threat, right? And in another sense too, like I can expressing love to someone actually has real vulnerability too, and it can be dangerous too, right? Like personally, emotionally dangerous. But so I had that experience early on. It was like and it kind of was like, which would you choose? And I was like, well, I want to choose love. Like I want to love people. I don't want to hate. Why would I want to do that? So it seemed kind of obvious to me um, and that worked pretty well for like 15 years. Now there were lots of because I'm always a person who writes a lot and I go online and there were conversations with people that were challenging or whatever. And I didn't always behave perfectly, but I think it was really that, yeah, 2015, 2016, like there's something happened in the zeitgeist that like for the most part, like 90% of people appreciated the way I came across until that era. And I think what happened was people started, this is my own like take on it, is that things in reality started to not feel like they were going as people expected, and there started to be like a sense of like people weren't feeling emotionally safe. And so they didn't someone who's out there exploring like, well, maybe this is what this is happening. This people wanted to have more like certainty, you know, they wanted to be like, no, this is how things are. Like I don't feel like emotionally I'm feeling kind of riled up and angsty. And so someone like me who comes on and like I'll read someone's post and I'm like, that's really interesting. Have you ever thought about it in this other way? Like I came to realize this about halfway into 2020. I remember one day because I was out riding my bike and I'm like, Bryan, asking people questions actually threatens them. Like until then, I'd never thought that. Until then, I'd always thought if you ask people questions, you're showing them like curiosity and interest or whatever. But like sometimes people like actually are not wanting, they're not putting something out there to have their what they're saying to have explored and to have questions. They're actually saying it to like have people reinforce, yeah, you're right, or whatever. And then that way so yeah, anyway, there's but going back to what you were saying at the start, I did also realize that really probably like by 2015, yeah, even before all this, that like I've had a lot of practice with all this that other people haven't. And the last thing I'll say that'll like I think puts all of this into a lot kinder perspective to all of us is that we are the first, you know, this is the first part humanity that we know of. I mean, let's discount theories about Atlantis, right? Let's, even though I actually think there's some truth to that, but let's throw that out off the table right now. As far as we know, we are the first humans who have, this ability to communicate online, right? Like across distances and spaces and time, right? And that is a big change to the human experience. And so, like, we're going to screw that up in a lot of ways. Like, we're still learning a lot. And so, I just feel a lot more I try to be a lot more understanding and compassionate about like, okay, we're not going to get this right because we're all learning. There's no rule book. No, our parents didn't go through this. Their parents didn't go through this. So we're all figuring this out together. So,
But at least, and like it was, I don't know how far you got in the conversation and like listening to the conversation I had with Karen. This remains one of my really points of deep, deep interest, which is so let's forget a moment about the exact details of the situation of, let's say, 2015, 16, 17, and make it about something else. So,
hmm,
somewhere in the village is a barn. And, over time, the barn has accumulated quite some stuff inside. No one exactly knows what it is. And one day, someone comes and flicks a, a light cigarette in the direction of the barn, and the thing literally, like tinder inflagration, starts completely burning, whatever. And the next day, everyone is pointing the finger at the guy and saying, like, he burnt the fucking barn down.
right,
And it's not a wrong description of reality. That, like, he flicked the cigarette at the barn and the barn burnt down.
right,
And then comes someone from the insurance company and says, like, yeah, but like, guys, I'm sorry, but I did some investigation here. You treated that barn as though, like, what were you thinking?
hmm,
You stored ever more dry stuff in there, and it had like all of that, like hay hanging out
fireworks
and
and
like whatever. Like, it was like this was an accident bound to happen, right?
right,
And I'm pretty sure that whether he's from an insurance company or not, I think that person will be chased out of town faster than anything.
hmm,
In part because the people in the village have come up with a story that explains to them, here's what happened, in a way where they can put all of the blame onto a scapegoat, and
hmm,
you'd better not dare question their story of reality. And I'm now coming to the point that I'm so
hmm,
curious about. I have a friend in that village, and he tells me that story. And I'm like, this is going to happen again to you, dude.
Hmm.
You clear out the barn. The guy who flicked the cigarette goes into jail, maybe for the rest of their lives, hard labor, whatever.
Hmm.
But whatever you built there, you will just do the same crap again. And the next barn will
Hmm.
burn in like 10, 20, 30 years. Like, this is not good for you. And I can see that. But how do I talk to my friend about that? Right?
Hmm.
Because I think it's
Hmm.
tricky,
Hmm. It's really hard. Yeah.
right? Your,
It's
your,
really
your
hard.
friend has this very strong attachment to a story that
Hmm.
makes them
That makes him the
feel
good guy. Yeah.
I
Or they're
I
not the
under
bad
I
guy at least.
understand
Yeah.
reality. That was the bad guy. No one did anything
Right.
wrong. Least of all me.
Right.
And that guy flicked the cigarette. So he was like, that's definitely what happened.
Right.
And you want to tell your friend, yeah, I really get it. Like, it would be so nice if the world worked that way, if it was all that simple. But
Hmm.
I really believe that if you look at the world in this simplified manner, you will run into so many obstacles. Like, you'll hit your head and stub your toe so many times because you just don't see things coming.
Hmm.
If you have a bit more curiosity about how things actually work in the world, you will
Hmm.
be so much better off. And as a friend, I would love to be able to tell him that. But I really
Hmm.
am running into my friend wanting to believe in this other story and what to do
Hmm.
about that. And it's a tough question because on the one level, I can definitely see as a friend, if I really want to be this person's friend, I want the best outcome for this person. Maybe I should figure out a way of telling him, even though it may be
Hmm.
hard, even though he may initially curse me, but in the end, he may thank me.
Hmm.
Just like if someone comes to a dentist and says, like, please don't drill, but no, no, no. I mean, there's really a cavity in that tooth. I'm sorry, but like, it's much better if I treat it. Yeah, but it's gonna hurt. Yeah, but it's much better if I treat it. And with a
Right.
dentist, you then have this trust that
Right.
this person knows what they're doing and you let it happen. But
Right.
that doesn't seem to be the case, or at least it seems now to me. And I'm wondering if part of that is like as you said, right? We're just not used to social media and this kind of having this ability of communicating this way because it just wasn't a thing in the past.
Right. I I would say that, I mean, of course, it depends on every relationship is unique, so you have to bring, you have to, the bit more you know someone, the more you, I think, can hopefully communicate with them um, in a way that's beneficial to both. But I would say that if you can start from a place of care, like, I care about you, and like, obviously, this was a distressing experience to go through, and I'm concerned that it's going to happen again. Not and like, yeah, of course that would not, but let's not focus on the fact that the cigarette thrower is going to show up. Like, that person always exists in these stories, the person who gets the blame, right? But like, how did we get to the place where once he threw the cigarette, it could actually cause, burn down the barn? Um, and like, why was that barn a fire hazard? In other words, um, but I'm having a similar experience right now with someone who's telling me that, I shouldn't, or he's confused about why I'm focusing on the past. He's like, well, like, what matters is what's going on right now. Why do we need to look back to a year ago or whenever? Like, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, well, one of the reasons you study history in the past, or you do, even on a personal level, self-reflection, is so that you learn from it, and then next time you do better. That's the simple answer, right? Like, I mean, so for your friend or anybody that, maybe unconsciously contributed to some negative outcome, like, okay, let's talk about this and see if but if you can tell them, like, if you can at least somehow communicate that I'm doing this because I care about you as a person, and like, this you didn't like, did you enjoy this experience? No. No, right? Okay, okay. Well, do you want to have it again? No. Well, then maybe we need to talk because I think I can help you, I think I have a perspective that might be able to help you at least maybe not avoid it altogether, but if it happens, it won't be so traumatic or whatever. So yeah.
And of course, I still feel tempted to reveal what what in my story the burning barn is
Right,
the analogy
right,
for, but I think we both know what it is. So like maybe
right. I
maybe
know
we
what it
just
is,
we leave it
and
at that. It's equally
I
orange.
right, right. I and I intentionally left off the yes, it is equally orange. Equally orange. Wow. Yeah, I intentionally left off the details of what this thing I wrote about in the
Yeah,
past
yeah,
was for the
yeah.
very same reasons because
Yeah.
yeah, same issues. So
Um,
yeah.
and then one other thing that's still from earlier in our conversation comes now back to me, and I can't even say exactly what it connected to, but it had to do with where you said in your, like 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when you were around 40, there was not yet this recognition of seize the day, carpe diem. This is
Right.
this one life that we have, and it's really kind of probably too precious to just like waste it on crap.
Mm.
And so I'm next year I'll be 50, and no, it's not a point of like, oh, I matured early. No, no, no. But I can certainly say this morning I had a good conversation, a really good conversation with one of my best friends. In fact, he was a regular at Rebel Wisdom, Young out of China. I don't know whether
Hmm.
you remember him. He
I
challenged
do
Ali
remember
and
him. Yeah,
David on
very
occasion with like some nice quips.
right.
And we became friends also about 5 years ago. And we've had a fantastic conversation this morning. And I told him there was this moment where, and we hadn't spoken in a while, and I don't know when I will speak with him again exactly. And then some technical difficulties in the conversation came up where his Wi-Fi wasn't working, and then the audio wasn't working in Zoom, and then we tried to use Telegram, and then that wasn't working, and then we tried Zoom again, and it was really annoying for a while. And I was really becoming aware 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I would have been totally pissed, irritated, annoyed, and under the annoyance would have been some hard to describe fear of disconnection.
Uh,
Like the quality of connection is going away, and that feels terrible to me.
right.
And that no longer occurs these days because there's somehow this very calm notion of no, no, no. I know that I care about him, and I know that I will do in the future everything I can to be connected. If and when this connection happens is then a little bit like the weather on the day that we met. That is the
Hmm.
universe having to play its part. And
Hmm.
as long as I'm doing my part,
Hmm.
that is really all I can do. And then that has
Right.
to be it. And
Hmm.
so I would say that for me, this growing up had a lot to do with letting go of what I think, because I still feel the sense, but it has transformed in my experience. In the past, it would have come out as fear, irritation, annoyance. God damn it, why is this not working? Right? This kind of like
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
sharp
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. I've been there.
clenching. And now it comes out as like, oh, I so enjoy being connected to this person. And it would be so sad if we can't talk for another half hour today, but that's okay. Like it would have been much more an opening. an opening
mm,
to the recognition of just how much I enjoy it.
mm,
And it would have actually served, and it did even in those moments when the connection seemed to break, it really served much more as a reminder of the good stuff
mm,
rather than a reminder of the bad stuff. And that
mm,
for me has been something where I'm really glad that in the last couple of years my maturation has taken me to a place where things that in the past would have greatly annoyed me, they now serve much more as reminders of this is what I'm grateful for. This is
mm,
what why
mm.
my life is good because yes, it is happening in this moment right now, but it reminds me how lucky I am otherwise.
Right, right. That's awesome. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think this is something that I have really learned primarily through friends. Because if I'm now looking back in time, what are the moments when I learned this?
Mm,
Yeah, and the moments when I learned this were primarily through people who, to this day, I very much consider friends who have, not because they necessarily wanted to, but just because of things that happened, taught me that lesson. And so I think I
mm,
would not have been able to learn it without friends. And so this is maybe one of the reasons why I'm also interested in this series. It's just I recognize that most of the things, most of the learnings that I've had that make my life better have come through friendships.
mm. That's interesting. I wonder, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the, relationships that are hierarchical, versus equal. Like, I wonder if that is a reflection of when the relations are in kind of from an equal perspective, there's more ability to, you know, we actually learn from each other better in a sense. I don't know, that just struck me. So yeah, it's but and then also what struck me too is I do know that I don't ever want to be that guy that like, back in my day it was better, or on the other hand, like being like what I just did, which is kind of almost say like, well, when I was 40, I didn't understand this. Now that I'm 50, I do. So I was kind of actually saying back then I wasn't mature enough. I didn't get it. Like I think there's a tendency we all have to do that where at least I do, where I look back and I can say, well, I didn't understand this then, and I wasn't wise then, but it's funny because I'm a writer and I tend to be like, I'm not much of a materialist and I don't collect much stuff, but I don't throw away my writing. Like, so and my parents moved house several years ago and they sent over a bunch of writing I've done at different stages of my life. And occasionally I'll just be in the mood to kind of go through it and like, I'll find stuff that I wrote when I was, 19, 20 or whatever. And I'm like, wow, that's really wow, I did have some wisdom back then. So I think we can tend to maybe pump up where we are at now, and then by doing that, we sell ourselves short, before or something. So probably I did. I just think the older you get, you do. For me, I'll just yeah. When I was 25, I went through pretty serious drug addiction, and there were people in my circle who lost their lives to drug addiction. So that experience alone kind of put at a reasonably young age that sense of like, life may not be forever. So having said that though, still when you're that age, you're like, I got 50 years, I got so many years ahead of me. And so it can be just easier to be like, well, if I waste some time right now, who cares? I've got time, right? But as the older you get, the more that future, whatever the limit of your age is kind of starts hitting you. And I think because 50 is this round number, I think all the round numbers of birthdays have an impact on kind of how you look at your life. But 50 is halfway to 100. So I just think it has that, um, at least for me, it just had that more of a serious, like, all right, it's time to, and then yeah, there's something else I could say about my life path that I've discovered through, astrology and human design, but I think I'll leave it there. But yeah, that 50 is an important year for my personality, that maybe more so than others. So
one curiosity or question that is coming up for me from what you said, because I agree, I am also looking back in my own autobiography and really trying to sense when did certain lessons, I would say, sink in. Because I
Hmm.
also, as I said, I started writing a blog, I think around a year or two after I arrived here. So about 2010 at the latest, maybe 2009.
Okay. Hmm.
And when I go back to those essays, yeah, I can also really see, wow, like how insightful this little dude in his 30s working at
Hmm.
Columbia University in the psychology department, how insightful this dude was.
Hmm.
What I would also say in addition is, and how little ability did I have at the time to actually translate what I wrote into
Hmm.
first person choice and experience.
Hmm.
Because I frequently still ran up against the fact that, sure, I could think my way through such a problem. But when it hit me personally, I was just as much out at sea, as if I hadn't written the post. And I would even go so far as to say back then I was trying to think my way out of certain problems.
Hmm.
And what I've noticed it is, as time has progressed, I can't think my way out of a problem
Hmm.
because, well, to get out of a certain problem, you have to find the exit door and walk through it. It's really
Hmm.
much more a matter of packing up the bags and understanding the place in which I exist is not a good place. And I need to find a
Hmm.
new place to exist in my own mental map. And to say, why ever I find this so cozy here, it is limiting. It is severely limiting to exist in this state. And
Hmm.
it's gonna be a lot of work, but there's the door. I figured it out. But to go through there, yeah, I have to leave a lot of the beloved furniture that I have collected in this space. I have to leave that behind and see what's on the other side of the door and then make my home over there. And in
Hmm.
the past, that was difficult.
Right.
Mostly
Hmm.
because, yeah, the furniture I had lived on some of that furniture since my teenage years.
Hmm.
And it was so
Right.
familiar. It was so
Right.
familiar, right? This idea of like, oh, if for instance I treat someone a certain way and I treat them with respect, and then they treat me in a way that I don't like, part of my furniture then told me that person is not worth like talking to, or like, these kinds of rules, the kind of like
Right.
attitudes that
Right.
you
They
develop,
give
and
us,
they're
yeah,
they're
structure
they're
kind of,
part
yeah.
of your mental
Hmm.
structure.
Hmm.
And no matter what you write in this kind of propositional way of like, oh yeah, but like I could also do, when it actually happens again, because you're sitting on the couch in your mental living room, it's just like, no, I'm not going to do that because like I hate, you'll come up with some reason to justify why you don't
Hmm.
have to put in some effort.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
for
took
sure.
me a long time to understand. No, no, no. Like no matter what I write, it's I like unless I move rooms, move compartments in my little mental space, it's not going to get any better.
Right. Well, that leads to the concept of, in my opinion, the concept of integrity, which is for me one of the ways I define integrity is like my words match my actions. And so if I go on and write a post about like, you know, big article about, this new diet that I've taken up, but I am not actually doing the diet, then that lacks integrity, you know? But those mental structures, those that comfort that we create for ourselves, it's another phrase that came to mind when you were talking is, which is not, I mean, it's, yeah, the devil that you know is, more what the devil that you don't know. Like, you know, if you open that door, it might be like, oh, this furniture out here is even worse than the one. That's what you tell yourself, at least. That we give ourselves a lot of different, you know, reasons for not making that move. Um, and so then we kind of stay in our habits and our areas of, you know, what we're used to, even if we know. But then eventually that voice, I think, at least for me, eventually that voice gets to the point where it's like, or that furniture just gets to the point where like, it just ain't very comfortable anymore, man. I'm getting out of here, you know, like I got to get out of here. I've got to go, you know, like whatever's on the other side, it can't be as like limiting or, you know, like this is just not for me anymore. And so time to grow, you know, so.
And I'm at least curious if for you, and this is it is a very personal question, so feel free to just like skip it completely and just switch topic. I imagine that your experience with drug addiction may have taught you that lesson about this place called rock bottom, where
Mhm.
you really understand the habitual choices that I make based on the mental furniture that is in my surroundings is no
Mhm.
longer serving me, and I have to get out of here. Whatever
Mhm.
I do, this room is no longer, I can no longer consider this room home.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I mean in that case it was again I was having like dreams and such and things that summer and you know like I said a couple people we knew one day we're here and one day they weren't. Like one of them was even written up about in the Los Angeles Times and but I was having even dreams that summer that like a lot of ways the universe was connecting to me, telling me like if you keep this up, you're not going to live much longer. Like you won't survive. Like you're 25 now, you've got a couple years left, and so that's kind of an extreme example of like the furniture is no longer working, you know. But I think it's harder when it's not obviously so threatening to your own sense of survival, you know. But you're right, going through that experience definitely has taught me how we can create that reality. You know, we can really create places of that seem comfortable, but they're actually places that limit what we're here to become. I mean, I believe we're all here to like I have a saying that, you know, people ask me what's the purpose or the meaning of life? And I am a writer who abuses alliteration from time to time, and so, but partly because alliteration is a good way to remember, you know. And so for me, life is for living, loving, and learning. I often say, and so living is just experience, you know. Like life is for having different experiences, and loving is obviously for loving the life, loving each other, and then learning is that aspect of always growing and you know like there's something new I'm going to learn today by waking up so um and then that using that kind of excitement about what you're going to learn to walk through that door you know and you know I think there's always that ability to push the metaphor a little further you know there's always that ability I guess if you walk into that other room and like it doesn't look good you can go back you know so leaving that as a possibility, you know, like, okay, maybe that was, in other words, like maybe that step I took, that door that seemed like the right door to go through, turned out to be a mistake or whatever. It turned out to lead somewhere that I didn't really want to go, or maybe wasn't so good for me. So, okay, I made a mistake. I'll try to, you know, think about it and, yeah, maybe not, not move so quickly or whatever. But I think we're talking more about getting stuck, you know, in our surround, in our mental constructs. So, yeah.
And at least, so I'm now really scanning my own friendship landscape, the people
Mm,
who I, over the last year or two, have mostly come to appreciate as friendship teachers, as the people from whom I have learned a lot. And yeah, I'm certainly struck by just a few very incisive moments. So for instance, just to give you one example, last year, it was in April or May, let's say April more likely. And I just had met this person online who I have not met in person in real life. And we started exchanging some Facebook messages back and forth. And I cannot say how the topic came up, but I just made a comment about why I had certain mental furniture, why I had certain habits. And I said something like, well, when I was a kid, my mom had some mental health issues, and later in life she became an alcoholic. And I said three more sentences like this, and then I
Hmm.
said, and so out of that I learned, and then I put some lesson in there, and so
Hmm.
that's why I am who I am. And his response, I cannot say exactly the words that he wrote back, but it literally for an instant I felt like he slapped me or something, because he said
Hmm.
something like, yeah, that's just like a stupid story that you tell yourself about your mom, so like wake up. Or, like like literally it was just
Hmm.
like one sentence.
Hmm.
And my very first reaction was just like, wow, this is so heartless or something, right? This is so like there's no compassion, there's no like, oh, that must have been terrible for you, like none of that. It was just like, it was literally pointing out in a pretty rude way, you are sitting in a pretty shitty chair
Right.
in a pretty
Right.
shitty room, and you're not even noticing it. And it smells already. It has a funny smell. Do you really want to stay in that room for much longer? Is that really what you want to
Hmm.
do? And again, I think it took me, because like it luckily only took me about 5 to 10 minutes to really realize, wait a minute. Yes, that stung, but why did it even sting?
Hmm.
Right? And to even like get there and be like, yeah, it was just like, as long as I keep repeating that story in my head, I will just not be even motivated to look at what alternatives could I
Hmm.
develop to those patterns that I'm now showing, because I'm telling myself, oh, I had this mother and I had this happen to me early on, and so I'm doing this and this.
Hmm.
What would be possible if I give up that story? And that was like such an aha moment. And no, I'm not inviting all of my friends who might be listening. Oh, please do that from this day on every day, because yeah, it can be quite a little bit, like
Right.
it does feel like Neo in the Matrix, where there is no spoon. It really feels like that a little bit. It is very
Right.
discombobulating when you realize I am making a lot of my choices because I have this furniture in my mind where I'm sitting very comfortably, and I'm not willing to go somewhere else, and that's why I'm stuck with certain choices. And it is
Hmm.
very uncomfortable to be kicked out of that chair and someone's like over there, like, because otherwise I can't talk to you. I
Right.
really can't have a useful conversation with you for as long as you insist staying in that stupid chair of yours. So please,
Hmm.
get the F up and like let's talk over there.
Hmm.
And in a way, I think what he did is, and it is one of my really favorite quotes of all times, right? Rumi the poet, who says, um, "There's this field beyond
Hmm.
right, wrong and right doing, and I'll meet you there," right? And it's from a longer poem,
Hmm.
but that's kind of like the
Right. Right.
punchline, right? And it
Hmm.
is saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Because as
Yeah.
long as you have this story about your mother and her mental illness in your head, you think you are right about certain choices. And
Hmm.
I'm not interested in that.
Right.
I'm much more
Right.
interested in what do you actually think would be a good choice for you now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not whether it's the right choice or whether you should be given the respect, or like, I get it. I get it. It hurt. It hurt a lot. And you made this wonderful furniture in your mind not to hurt so much. And yet, can't we please have the conversation in this other field over there, where you're
Hmm.
not stuck in this room with that stupid furniture of yours?
Hmm. Yeah, there's a couple things I would say to that. This just came to me right there at the very end. About seven, let's see, when was, yeah, 2018 was 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, I remember listening to Gabor Mate was on with Russell Brand on Russell Brand's old podcast. Back before Russell. I mean, I don't know. I still love Russell, but Russell's a whole nother story. But yeah, and Gabor Mate said something to me that like actually it was like having the best like therapist or what he said something along the lines of like you chose addiction to as a survival mechanism. It wasn't stupid. It was actually it was your best to you that was a choice you made to survive some emotional pain or whatever. And it was like it wasn't a stupid choice. You're still here, right? You're listening to this right now. And I remember I was riding my bike. And dude, I started like feeling like emotions and tears, and I pulled my bike. It was kind of in a on a cycling road that has a fair amount of people. It was, warmer seasons, so I instantly drove off this trail and went down and found a private place, and had a really good cry because it was like, thank you for reframing what I've thought about myself all these years, which is like, how could I have been so stupid to, become an addict, kind of thing. Where he was saying, no, actually, you were doing something to protect yourself and to survive. Um, and so that kind of, yeah, I think, but I don't even know why that really comes up right now, but just the ability to recognize that like we build that mental furniture for a reason and it served us, but maybe it's no longer serving us, I think is what I'm
Yeah,
trying to get at.
yeah.
Um, and then the second thing is like, you know, going to kind of the friendship thing, like I think one of the things that does make friendships have this ability to, be such great teachers and growth opportunities is that, you know, our spouses or, family members or people who are kind of like quote unquote stuck with us, for better and worse, like we're gonna or even coworkers, right? Like where you feel like you're in this situation where like you can't necessarily leave. Like with a friend, like you can kind of like there's a little more freedom to like just say to them, you need to hear this, right? And now, granted, I think obviously he probably could have said it in a much more, at least just with one sentence of like, man, that must have been hard to grow up with that or whatever. And, like, I'm sorry you went through that. Now here's what but he didn't do that, whatever, you know. But yeah, I think it's valuable when people tell us things sometimes then the other thing I wanted to say is that this is my opportunity to give a little PSA, public service announcement, which is one trick I've learned about like online interacting, which I think has served me really well and also served the people I've related with very well, is like when I read something that triggers me, well, my rule of thumb is like, and actually recently I've just now incorporated this into other areas of my life, and I've actually I call it the take 30 rule, which is 30 minutes. Um, don't do anything right now. Take 30 minutes. And so, but like if someone's really triggered me and I just feel all this emotion, then I will get off that social media and open like a Word document, and I would just write out exactly what I want to say to them. I'll, let it all, don't everything, all the emotion, just all the fire, whatever. And then once I get that out of me, then I'll take that 30 minutes and then I'll come back to it because then it gives you a chance to reflect on it. And then you come back to it, you read what you wrote. Oh, I could say this a little better, or I don't need to say this at all. or or it all needs to be said as is or whatever, but you've given yourself that chance to reflect on it, and like what you were saying, like that reflecting on what is it that triggered me in the first place, like why was I so stung by that, you know and then you go from there. So
I do wanna because Brian, this is now I think one of the learnings that I may explore want to explore and maybe even already provisionally not so much accept, but at least strongly consider. Coming back to the guy with the match and the burning
We sure have a
barn.
lot of metaphors going right now. Yeah, we're in the barn again. Okay. Or next to the barn, at least. Yeah.
And the guy who insists it was right, because that's also mental furniture. And then really
Mm,
to separate what you said about the addiction was a choice for self-preservation at a given time.
mm,
And if I can tell the guy who insists, no, that guy threw the match, if I
mm,
can tell that guy, I have a lot of compassion for the little boy in your past who had to
mm,
blame it on other people to be safe.
mm,
And I'm now asking you to leave that furniture behind,
mm,
where it
mm.
is a yes and. Because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
totally agree. I can tell someone exactly the message that you got on that bike ride from Gabor Mate, saying,
Mm,
you have to forgive your past self for putting you in a
right,
position that you now have come to understand is not good for you. You have to forgive that. Because as long as you
right.
try to beat up on that little kid, you can't, because the kid made this whole bunker with the furniture to be safe.
Mm,
And
right,
as long
right,
as you keep beating up on the kid, of course it's not going to give up the bunker.
right. Of course, right,
So you have to forgive that in order to then say, and why don't you come out of the bunker?
right, right.
Because it typically is a motif of survival.
Mhm.
I chose, typically unconsciously, but I chose to build this furniture to survive.
Mm,
And for the time that I needed it, it served its purpose. And of course, it would be so much better if I could leave it behind, but it will take me to do that willingly because ultimately I have to leave that furniture behind willingly. I
mm,
can't drag
right,
someone out of there. That is, they have to step, it's in their mind. They have to step out of that room willingly. And I do
right,
think what you said, this compassion for understanding that you made that choice because it did serve you at some time.
right,
That is, I
right,
think, one of the super important ingredients that allows someone to step out of that room at some point because
right.
they no longer
And
need
yeah,
to blame themselves for it.
right. Yeah, and like, I mean, that whole experience led me to realize, why even all these years later, I had still, you know, fallen into addictive. It wasn't nearly as, extreme as heroin and cocaine or whatever, but why I would still resort to using, and, the thing about the whole topic of addiction, it's a whole nother matter, but like, I actually tend to believe that the vast majority of people are addicts in one way or another, like, and that could be there's just so many things to do that with. But a lot of the reason we do it is because it's an emotional safety net in a way. Like it's a way to serve in our minds, at least, and in our experience too. Like people like try to deny the fact that, like Gabor Mate said, that it's like it works in that short term, it works. And
Yeah.
so you're not being stupid, like you were a moment ago feeling a bunch of anxiety and like your life felt really crappy. You did a drug and then all of a sudden you feel better. So it worked. Like, is that a stupid decision? If you're gonna be one of these people who's like, well, what about your long-term future and all that? It's like, well, yeah, but that long-term stuff is all in our head too. That's all, but the immediate is what we experience. Um, so to kind of recognize that, like, and the other thing I'll say is I had another experience where this was a kind of, yeah, well, it was a psychedelic experience, but um it wasn't a really like heavy dosage or anything, but I was kind of having a understanding of my relationship with alcohol, and it was like I realized like I actually came around to thanking alcohol for helping me, as opposed to all this like time I didn't being like, oh, alcohol is bad or whatever. Like I'd have these categories. It was like, no, thank you for like being there, but we don't have to necessarily have a long-term or daily relationship. You know what I mean? Like it's been good, but it's time to break up. that this part, this
Yeah, yeah,
aspect of our really, but actually recognizing that, going back to the furniture, that like you served me well, thank you, like actually having gratitude to it. And then I think that makes it easier to leave behind than if you have to see it as like totally in a negative perspective. So, there, as an astrologer, I recognize that there's like a timing for everything, and so um we may not necessarily know exactly when that is, but when we kind of reflect upon that, just that understanding that, maybe I wasn't ready for it yet, or I had to go through this to get to this, and um, it's okay. It's all okay in the end, So,
yeah. And this is something where I'm definitely not there yet. And I certainly feel tempted to develop further in that direction. I'm not sure if I want to reach the absolute extreme endpoint of that direction, which is something like becoming friends with reality really just as it is, and to take
mm,
everything that happens as a potential teacher, and
mm,
to say, okay, I see whatever horrible thing I see, and to, as soon as possible, no longer think of that as like, oh, that's horrible, that shouldn't have happened,
mm,
but to see it as like, oh yeah, here's another friend reality sends my way that can be a teacher if I know how to work with that piece.
mm,
And
mm,
this for me is one of the things, and I haven't released that conversation yet, but it has to do for me with one aspect of friendship that I would call the redemption pattern,
mm,
where someone treats me in a way who I thought is a friend, but then treats me in a way where I really cannot believe that that happened,
mm,
where I want to quit the friendship.
mm,
And then what leads me back to try it again with this person? What needs to happen? And part of this is really kind of, I don't know, you know, I sign a mortgage, and then it turns out to be I have been completely tricked, and the apartment is, or the house is like, I don't know, wasp infested or whatever, is not worth even the paper on which I made the signature, or like whatever, right? So I have really reason to feel very shitty about reality. Something really bad happened.
mm,
And then to say, with that situation, yeah, okay, yeah, like I really all my expectations of like, I thought you were this kind of friend, and now you turn out to be this other kind of person, right? This other kind of situation. But how can I work with you?
mm,
What can I do, and what does need to happen so that I can work with this situation or with this person? And yeah, it sounds very extreme, because there I can think of still so many things that could happen in my life that would be so difficult to simply work with. And yet, yeah, in my imagination, if I can be the person who is able to do that, there's just like nothing that I need to be afraid of anymore. Because no matter
mm,
what happens, I can just work with that. I can just like take that as like, yep, that is the next thing. That's the next thing that you universe throws at me. And then come over, come in already. I'm going to work with you,
mm, mm.
right? Where it
Yeah.
is it's a very different attitude than, what I currently still see in my life, where, and it doesn't have just to do with being selective, because I really enjoy friendship with some people where it is more of a challenge, as you said, right? You want to talk with
Right.
people who are different. That is
Mm,
fun, because
mm,
it really has this quality of leveling up my consciousness, so that is great.
right. Right.
But what is necessary for me to consider someone a friend? And yes, it has to do with this kind of like, you're not here to beat up on me, for instance.
Mm, right.
But the experience of being beat up on very frequently is just a subjective experience. The experience that leads me to staying in that room with the furniture. And
Mm,
can I give up the story that I am being beat up on at the moment?
mm,
Because that's a story, right? If I
mm,
see buying an apartment that turned out to be a wasp infested shithole, if I see that as like, oh, the universe is beating me up for being so naive, sure,
mm,
as long as I'm on that story because I need to feel safe, I will be stuck in that room for a very long time.
mm.
But if I can say, no, no, the universe just sent me a very, very difficult friend.
Right, right, right. This is a challenge, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, like it's going to be a challenge to be your friend, but like let's try that out.
right,
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough, but that's another story, and I can live in that
right,
story. I can move out of the furniture and out of the room of me being the victim into the room of like, okay, let's make friends with you and let's see how that goes.
right,
And then I'm in a different room and I can
right.
build new
Well,
furniture.
yeah, that gets to that you just said the word victim there because like one of the I know you've heard me go on beat this dead horse a bit, but the whole I don't know why, I can't remember what instigated it, but sometime in 2020 I became aware of the Cartman drama triangle, the victim, bully, savior dynamic, and it became so clear to me how often that is at the heart of a lot of the problems in our relationships. And in that there was something that in my looking into that and learning about it that I found, which is like there's like another outs that's the furniture, room we're talking about now, the nasty room, that's the Cartman drama triangle. But then there's another version of a triangle where like you're not a victim anymore. You're a co-creator, and then the people around you, like the person who's the bully becomes the challenger, and then the savior becomes the coach. And like then you're all working together. You see everybody in all three people, you see each other again. There's an equality here. Like I mean, there's a difference because you're playing a little different role, but like I'm co-creating right now. The challenger is going to come here and help, push me. And it's interesting because another thought that came up is I've never connected these two together, but I used to listen to a couple in like 2018. I was going through this phase of learning of Ken Wilber and integral theory, and I used to listen to this podcast, the Integral Theory podcast, I think, with Jeff Sol. Oh no, Daily Evolver was what it was called by with Jeff Salzman. I think he's still around. And one of his like pet sayings is like, "We fight and fuck our way forwards." Again, he must like alliteration too. Uh, but like that is kind of that carbon, like the fight person is the challenger and the fuck person is the coach, right? So if we can see everybody in our life is like, and then using astrology, that would be the fight person is Mars and the fuck person is Venus. Like those are our how we relate with each other on personal levels, right? And as long as we can see that when you go from victim to co-creator, the main reason that like is a big jump is like all of a sudden you are responsible for the room, the furniture, like you're not, it's not just I got a shitty deal, like they handed me a bad hand of cards or whatever, like, and all that stuff may be true. Like you may have been, you may have entered the world in a tough situation, although my own belief is that we choose before we come here what situation to incarnate into. So that's probably harder to prove, but I mean, but regardless, obviously life gives us situations where it's like, man, this is a really hard thing to deal with. Um, but if you're still in that mindset of like, okay, for some reason I'm creating this too, and like how did I create this situation, and how can I not see that person as bully, but that person is challenging me. And okay, all right, and I'll finish with this. Like, I'm a big Beatles fan. And one of the reasons I think the Beatles were the Beatles is because John Lennon and Paul McCartney had this kind of like, like, I'm going to write a better song. No, I'm going to, like, it was a friendly competition, right? Like, so they understood that, like, instead of seeing it like, oh, Paul beat me with that song, John would be like, all right, that song did better than mine. I'm going to write a better one, So they just use each other, the challenge of each other, to actually create something that they never could have by themselves. And also didn't mean to leave you out, George. I think you played a role too, but just trying to keep things simple. And Ringo, you're a great drummer too. Ringo, you're great. Ringo, don't. Yeah, Ringo fans don't hate on me. I love Ringo. I'm great, but yeah.
And that for me is the flip side, right? So when I said if I want to go to this friend who is stuck in this story, the flip side of that for me is what what is a reasonable expectation to have of friends where yes, I want their emotional support. I want their I don't want a Trump-like loyalty where they all have to kiss my ass, but I certainly would want
Right,
them to root for me.
right, right,
I want to feel them on my side.
right,
Whereas like if they directly challenge me, then I don't feel them on my side, right? So like
right.
and it's so tricky to really kind of do both of that. And I'm wondering if part of this is like maybe that's why this is like really it needs to be a triangle so that you have a coach and you have a challenger, and that when they are
Mm,
both in the same person it really gets very very tricky from an experiential perspective, because if
mm,
I see someone really in a moment as a challenger in that very moment, to then also see them as a coach might be a little tough,
mm.
despite the
Right.
fact that
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that a good coach, a really good coach, will fulfill both of these positions
Mm,
and go back and forth and coach and challenge and coach and challenge and coach and challenge,
right.
right?
Well, I think that's the key, yeah, to being like, yeah, I mean, I think I was a sports writer and I follow sports reasonably closely. And one of the reasons I love, especially team sports, is I love the psychology of it. And like, yeah, the coaches that are successful are the ones who can play both those roles, but they're really good at discerning when to play both those roles, but they don't mix it up, like in this moment, I'm challenging you in this moment, and it's not going to work. And the really good coaches obviously know each player on the team has a different, you know, this player needs coaching right now. This player needs challenging right now, like it's not the same for everybody. So, um, but yeah, that's a good point. I think that it's just good to, I think, to be aware of that. Like if we are in that position with someone else that like, okay, right now, like even entering into the situation with a friend like that, like, okay, am I going to be a challenger or coach? I think is probably a useful question to ask, like which, and then I think you can bring in, again, first of all, starting from this drama triangle, like obviously you're in the lower one and you're in bully mode, like you're seeking to put this person down, the victim, right? You're seeking the hierarchy, right? Like I'm gonna win. There's a winner and a loser here. So the higher triangle is like everybody's trying to help each other out, right? So hopefully that's where you're at. But I think even when you're in challenger mode, there are ways like we were talking about earlier to, maybe make a coach comment at the start. Like, it sounds like a tough situation you went through and growing up, and having that situation with your brother or whatever. That was hard. However, we got to talk about what you can do now to maybe overcome that. And then that goes into challenger. So, maybe giving that little bit of an acknowledgement of, like um emotional support, but then that allows the person to be like, okay, they feel my to use the Clinton term, they feel my pain. And now I'm willing to hear what they have to say, rather than just being like straight on, um, yeah, like time to get out there and you need to do 100 push-ups in the rain every morning, like, okay, can you like at least give me some hot chocolate before I go, or promise it for when I get back, like, uh,
Yeah, I can just tell this is now, and it's going to be probably an inquiry that will sit with me for the next few days, at the very least, maybe weeks, is exactly this piece that you spoke to, the discernment of when and then how to take each of those two roles in turn,
Mm.
and to develop that as a skill. And then on the receiving end, to just as much as possible default into the one up triangle of like, this is not the drama triangle, this really is the
Mm.
co-creation triangle, the triangle
Mm.
of empowerment, right? Where,
Right. That's what it's called. Yeah, it's called the empowerment, uh,
because
the empowerment
ultimately,
dynamic, I think. Yeah, but
and
yeah,
and
yeah, the
and this
empowerment,
is
right.
a step that I think the individual players must take again voluntarily. You can't
Mm.
drag someone out of the victim role. They need to
Mm.
voluntarily step out of it and say, okay, I accept the challenge.
Mm.
Because
Right.
as long as they
Yeah.
don't accept the challenge, they can just claim victimhood.
Yeah.
And again, for this person to understand, yep, there was a time in your life many years ago where what kept you emotionally safe
Mm.
was the knowledge that you could always withdraw into that lower triangle, into that position. You could always
Right.
get there mentally.
Mm.
If your dad comes with a belt and wants to beat you up, yes,
Mm.
it will physically hurt like fucking hell, but at least mentally you can withdraw into the I am the victim position. And in that moment, it really probably wouldn't have made any much sense to say, oh no, he's just a challenger. Let's see what happens. It's just like, what the
Right.
heck are you
Right.
talking
Right.
about? In that moment, really not a good
Right.
idea.
Right.
But if you keep doing that with people who yell at you when you are stepping out of line in a grocery store or whatever, and then you think back to this kind of when I was 3 years old, in that moment it is no longer serving you,
Right. Right.
right? And to have
Right.
compassion for the 3-year-old for doing that. There was
Right.
nothing
Right.
wrong for building this kind of like almost torture chamber in the victimhood
Mm.
seat, right? There was nothing wrong for doing that. In all likelihood, you had to do that. But for the love of God, there
Right.
is in the empowerment triangle a much, much more royal. It's a sovereign seat. It's like you become the king of your life. You become the sovereign of your life and gain your
Mm.
sovereignty if you step out into this empowerment triangle.
Yeah, for sure.
And how
And I
much
think,
courage that takes. And that's, I think, where the coach then comes in, right? It's just to say,
right.
yep, it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of chutzpah, and you have to like accept,
But I see that
man,
you have it in you and you can do it, like, yeah,
exactly. You have it all
you
in
have
you.
it.
So like don't waste it.
I mean, here's another philosophical framework. I mean, again, going back to my kind of spiritual worldview, like what everything is all about. But and I did last year when I did 366 podcasts in a row for some crazy reason, had a lot of time, I could talk about anything. So I did a lot of episodes, and one of them I remember it was like in March, it was in mid-March. And I talked about how it's my core belief that like every person who incarnates as a human is a very brave, courageous person or soul, because to be human is very hard. And and when you actually start thinking about that, that automatically then gives you respect for everyone else that you run into, because like, wow, you chose to be human too. Yeah, this is a tough ride, isn't it? But on the other hand, like once you see that, then you can see that, oh my God, I'm really this courageous soul that decided to do this. So where else can I aim that courage now that I'm here? And so then that kind of also in a way it empowers people, but then it also tells them like, you know what, I'm not really going to accept you to stick around in victimhood forever, like you can do it, it's your choice, but I'm not going to necessarily be the one to sit here and like reinforce that mental construct you have in your head about being a victim, because you're not doing yourself any good and you're not doing the people in your life any good. And like, so, um, recognize that it maybe served you at some point, but here's a choice you can get out of it. So, and I believe you can do it, so yeah.
Um, for a moment I was imagining I'm still enjoying this immensely, this topic, I mean this subtopic, but I also was imagining someone listening to this and be like, yeah, come on guys, next topic please.
Right, 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 right. Can you
Speaking
stop
about
talking about the furniture? Yeah, yeah,
beating a dead horse. And so let me just ask you, Brian, does anything still like come to mind? Anything at all with regards to friendship, our friendship, any friendships of people that we know, or like anything at all? Because it is still an open field
yeah.
wherever the ball wants to roll.
Yeah. I mean, there's something you and Jeremy, I think I might have brought this up to also in one of our calls, but I think I shared with you guys that like a friend of mine who had, because of his mental construct of me, decided to drop me as a friend a couple 4 or 5 years ago. Um, for whatever, and like it really hurt because this is someone I knew in person and we went through some pretty hard times together in college. And I just always thought he was kind of almost like family, like we would never have this sort of split, right? So it hurt. And anyway, for whatever reason, I was doing some gardening about 10 days ago and I was listening to a podcast and I thought, you know what, my friend, this old friend would really enjoy this. And I want to see if I can send it to him. Just, and see what happens, right? And long story short, like I was, and but there'd been a problem where we were unable to, like he had blocked me on Facebook, and then I think my group of college friends who he was a circle member of, um, had told me last year, like, oh, they'd all lost contact with him. I don't see he's not on Facebook anymore. I don't know what, but anyway, so I reached out to them and they said, "Oh yeah, he's back on Facebook now." And then when I typed his name on Facebook, it was not only is he back on Facebook, but he'd added me as a friend again. So I'm like, I guess things are well, at least I can send this video, right? So I sent him a video and I sent him a little, why I sent it to him. And um as a result, like it's like we like none of that ever happened. And like, but there's this thing going on in me where it's kind of like, all right, do I not bring this up? Do I just let it go? Because and like maybe we're just friends like around music and these other topics that we have shared interest in, and we just don't talk about that other thing. Um, or is this
Can I
elephant need to be addressed? Yeah, go ahead.
can I get a telephone joker? Let me start with another question.
Hmm.
This I assume it's a guy. This gentleman wouldn't by any chance be
Yeah.
Filipino, and no, probably not. But like, um, so my first boyfriend, long-term boyfriend, he's Filipino, and he told me, and in fact, I lived with him on the sidelines through one of these stories, but he also told me several other stories where he got into not a misunderstanding, but really a kind of like two people being cross at each other with each other and then not talking for a while. And then at some point, something happened where one person randomly got invited to a Facebook group or like oh, do you want to sign this person's birthday card? And then, yeah, okay, I'm going to sign. And then it's signed. And then all of a sudden, the people talk again, but they never mention that this had happened. They just like pretend it didn't happen. And why I said telephone joker, yeah, I'm not sure what to make of that, but I can totally see that there are cultures
Hmm.
where people deal with it that way.
Oh, Japanese culture does for sure.
And
I would say, yeah,
I
yeah.
and and I think part of it is just and that's the thing. So I no longer want to claim, I certainly don't want to claim that I'm right. It wouldn't feel natural to me. It wouldn't feel like my nature. Maybe because I'm a bit of like a Sherlock Holmes type of guy who likes to discover things and likes to
Mm,
clear things up. It's just like,
mm,
I like that stuff, clearing things up.
mm,
But who am I to say that that's the best way, right? Because I can
right.
totally see that there's wisdom in understanding. Yeah. So there is a relationship, and the relationship has some kind of malfunction. My car doesn't start today. I don't know. I hit on the hood a couple times and it still doesn't start. Okay, I come back later and then it starts again. Sure, I could bring it into the garage and have it looked at, or I could simply accept, oh, it's going again. And of course, human beings are not cars, right? Or friendships are not cars. But like, who am
Mm,
I to say that bringing it into the garage is the best course of action? I do
mm,
not know that,
right.
right? Maybe I should just accept this is a gift from heaven. Friendship is working again. Let's just
Mm,
let's just work with it. And it's
right.
tough. It's really tough because
It is tough. Yeah.
I don't think that I could give an answer that I could derive from first principles where it would always be correct. I don't think
Right.
so.
No, I don't think
What I
so
can
either.
say
Yeah.
is I suspect that if the misunderstanding came out of something that to this day is very important to both people, then I think it is likely to show up again not too long from now.
Right.
And in that case, at
Right.
least, I would at least say proceed with caution. You
Right.
really need to be very careful where to place the danger cones to say, here's the off ramp into like here's down the cliff. Don't drive here, right? You have to be
Mm,
extremely mindful of that. Whereas if whatever the source of the misunderstanding and dysfunction of the relationship was just a genuine misunderstanding. And it's so funny. I've had something like this happen with a friend just a while ago where I sent the guy a message and he took it one way in a way that it didn't even occur to me that that is how I meant it, but he took it that way. And then
right.
he literally just like didn't respond for like 3 months. It was like, wow, well, what the heck is he like in a hospital? And I at some point really started thinking something
Mm,
bad must have happened to him. And then it just turned out he had misunderstood a message. And then once it was cleared up, it was cleared up. And we now no longer have to talk about it. And it would be
right.
weird if I now started to poke, yeah, but why did you understand it? Like I would make it worse. I would
Right.
literally make it worse if I tried to dig up exactly
Right.
why it was a fucking misunderstanding. Move the
It
fuck
happens.
on,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right. No big deal. Right.
And so for me, I think that would be one of the markers of to whether or not it is worth clearing it up. Was this a
I
genuine
think
misunderstanding, or was this just like something that really we need to clear up?
I think there's actually a core like issue, and like you said, but like the way I'm approaching it now is like I don't like for me, I don't have any strong need to force that conversation, but I'm like just kind of watching, just like I had the intuition when I was out gardening, like, hey, I had to send this message. I'm just gonna kind of keep tuning into my intuition on this and like um but yeah, he's already written a few things to me that I was just like, well, if I responded to that, then that would open this up again, right? So I'm kind of aware of what I honestly think. I may be wrong. I think he may not, like from his perspective, I think maybe it wasn't really that big of a deal. Like he might not even really remember what happened. Whereas I can remember the exact words he used with me, to break things off. So because it was a strange phrase. I mean, more or less, it was the way he phrased it. I was like, that's something no one has ever said to me before. But I also wonder too if there's a knowing in him that like if I go into that, that's gonna like mean I'm gonna have to dig into some stuff that I don't want to talk about. So maybe he wouldn't even if I push it in that direction, he would, you know, avoid it. So I'm just going to kind of follow things. I'll say the last thing about it that's interesting to me is that because of his mental furniture, back to that, his mental constructs, um, he has denied himself the opportunity to get together with me in person in the near future. and only because of the location I will be in at that moment. He doesn't want to visit that part of the world because of his mental constructs. And honestly, there was a part of me that was like, I'm kind of glad he's not going to come because that would have this stuff would probably come out if we were to be in person, because I'm too courageous in how I speak and too authentic in who I am. And I can't really like, if something were to come up, I'd be like, hey man, like, come on, let's not, and then anyway, so I think it would be more likely to come up in person, but because he has this construct, it's kind of like, all right, great, we don't have to worry about it. So we'll just remain kind of, talking. But he did say something about like doing like a Zoom call or a video call, and I was like, yeah, that would be great. But then I thought about it more. I'm like, well, this then this might come up, So I have to really question. I think I'm gonna do that with him, but I think I'm gonna do it at a time where I feel like I've got the space and the emotional, comfort to do it. But so probably wait a little bit and see how things go. So.
And I just want to point out, so you have given me another inspiration for like an inquiry that I want to with myself and anyone who's interested for some of the next conversations get into, which is so like the dimension that I'm primarily interested in is friendship.
Mm,
But I think there's another dimension that is really independent of that, and that is the dimension of how mature are people. Because you can
mm,
have a friendship as like two 6-year-olds or two 12-year-olds or two
right.
15-year-olds. You can even have a friendship between a 16 and a 22-year-old, right? So that all kind of
Mm,
works. But I think it is more fun, maybe now that I'm almost 50, to have an adult friendship. And
mm,
what does that entail above and beyond just friendship? And I would say spontaneously, adults and I'm parroting this from someone who I have thought about it, and I think it really sounds fitting, or it sounds coherent to me. Adults ought to be able to talk about anything.
mm,
If you are truly an adult human being, there shouldn't be really much that in terms of conversation you want to run away
right.
from.
Mm,
To the extent that you want to retreat into this Cartman triangle victimhood position, or like, oh, this is too dangerous. I need to go, like, oh, how dare you, right? If that is your inner
mm,
experience, at least with respect to that topic, I would say, well, you're not fully matured yet, because
mm, mm,
you see the tiger over there, and rather than calling up the people in your village and say, "Hey, that's a nice piece of meat over there. Let's go out and get it." You're like, "Oh, there's a tiger." Oh, and you kind of make this move. And no, that doesn't mean that you have to run at every tiger, but at least you shouldn't have this habitual response of like, "Oh, goodness."
right. Right.
And so when it comes to, for instance, the topic of whatever was at the root with this person, right? And it, you know, I could take a guess, but whatever it is, one of the questions that I would have for almost any friend is, and that will be my inquiry for myself. Do I want to ask certain friends that question? Do you believe that our friendship is one where we want to treat each other as fully adult people where nothing is off the table?
Mm,
Is that something you want with me? And if you say, no, there's some topics I don't want to talk about, I can respect that. I
mm,
will, in
mm,
my mental representation of you, just say, okay, on these topics, maybe you're a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old, and I don't treat you like a 30-year-old, right? And I won't
mm,
necessarily have to say it that way, but like the idea is, I accept that there are topics that are triggering, and you're letting me know I'm not ready to give up my furniture because I still have those landmines. They will trigger me. I get into like a little bit of overwhelm, and then I just don't know what to do with that. Okay, great. Thanks
right.
for letting me know. That's helpful.
Mm,
Or the person can say, no. I want to learn with you how to be an adult. Great. Let's talk about it. I mean,
right, right. Are you sure you want to do that?
no, exactly. I don't
Right,
have to
right.
do it in this kind of like,
Right,
okay,
I
let
know,
me
I
be the
know.
challenger then. You know, I don't have to provoke it, but at least I want to know. I want to
Right.
know with people, what do you say?
Right.
And I
Right.
think I can totally accept that someone tells me, because this is something that came out of some conversations already. I have a bowling friend, and I'm learning
Hmm.
with this person how to become a better bowler. And I go to the bowling alley and we shoot the shit and whatever we talk, but we never talk politics or family life or whatever because I know he would get triggered. And it's totally fine. I have a bowling friend. He doesn't
Right.
have to be my confidant about how to solve my marriage problems. I talk to someone
Hmm.
else, right?
Right.
And that can still be an amazing friendship
Hmm.
when it comes to
Right.
bowling, right? So
Hmm.
I'm totally happy to think of friendships as bound to
Yeah, the
certain
compartment.
domains.
Yeah, there's certain compartments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's no problem with that. Not everyone
Hmm.
needs to be my stand-in therapist with whom I talk about
Right.
everything. That's just not necessary. I just
Right.
want to know. And if you tell me that you want to be this person with whom I can talk about every topic as an adult, then please treat me with the according respect and do not do the Cartman drama
Right.
triangle
Right.
move. Because you just
Right.
told me you want to be an adult. So please.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's for me, that has to do with what you said earlier with integrity, right? Can
Right.
you be honest about where you're at? Do you have this know thyself insight into here are my triggers, please don't step on these landmines and we can be great friends?
Right. Well, I was going to say that that brings up probably the last thing I'll bring up just is the shadow, like it's your how much do people know who they are and what will be their triggers, like that's a whole nother matter entirely. So, you can ask them to do that, but if they have a big shadow about something, then it still might come up, but
Sure.
you'll have to figure that out. So, um, but I think I'm feeling a bit of nature calling, and it also feels like that the conversation's gotten to kind of a sort of wound down. I mean, you and I could
No, no,
probably go on like hours and hours. I know we can because we did it in the rain for like 8 hours, so for 10 hours or whatever until you passed out because you were jet lagged, um, which I still remember. I remember there was at least an hour of me talking to you and like realizing that he's not really responding, Brian. He's really tired right now. But I was like, yeah, but I'm having a good time, so I'm gonna keep having this beer and keep talking. But anyway, but this has been awesome, and I really think it's a cool project. And yeah, it's cool. Like one thing was gonna say, just on a meta perspective, like I got a little triggered like a few years ago when kind of after around COVID and that era when a lot of, podcasts were starting to really like podcasting and the whole kind of like these long form conversations were starting to be happening. There was a part of me that was triggered that like all of these people, the rebellisms or whatever, like they always have to have people on who have all this like long lists of credentials and this and that. I'm like, why don't you just have some quote unquote regular people on, So I appreciate that, I think there is a whole, with this all this communication technology we have, like there's so much room for growth that we can, like people having just conversations with each other and then putting it out there for others to listen in on and like realize how much wisdom is out there amongst just the masses, So um now I'm just saying at the end there that you and I are very wise people, and so people should bow down to us and respect everything we say. I'm
As
not saying that, but
as the trickster that you are, yes.
yes, yes. Everybody, please bow now. I don't know. That'll probably trigger something. That'll probably trigger something on the no. Here, I'll do this one for the masses. This is my sign off, as Jochen knows. I love that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um, Brian, thank you so very much. This was a real pleasure and a treat. Have a great, since it's already Monday for you, a great
it is
Monday.
Monday. Yep, yep,
And
yep.
until our next time, hopefully in the sense making crew.
Yep. Hopefully, to see you there. I plan to be there. All
Okay.
right, Jochen. Thanks again. Take care.
Bye, Brian. Bye bye.
Bye bye.